Thank you for joining JMT Consulting for our expert speaker series. My name is Melissa Waters, and I'm the Manager of Events and Programs here at JMT Consulting. We are happy to have Peter Mirus, a partner at Build Consulting, with us today to talk about how to create an information strategy for your organization. Just a quick thing about JMT, we're an ERP and financial management solutions firm with 28 years experience, and we specialize in nonprofits. We work with a wide variety of software partners to find the best solutions for your nonprofit. I'd like to share a few housekeeping notes, and then I'm going to turn it over to Peter. If you have any questions at all during the webinar, please submit your questions in the questions panel on your control panel. At the very bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box that you can click on. We will answer those at the end of the webinar, but you can ask at any point during the webinar. We are also recording today's webinar, so you will get a copy of that recording as well as a copy of the slides after the webinar. Finally, I'd like to introduce Peter. He is an expert at helping nonprofit organizations and people to learn, communicate, and grow through the use of technology. He has over 20 years of experience as an executive strategist, analyst, and solution developer, serving more than 80 nonprofits and professional services firms, ranging from startups to large international organizations. Again, we're happy to have him with us today, and with that, I will turn it over to Peter.
Thanks, Melissa, and thank you everyone for attending today. As Melissa said, my name is Peter Mirus. I'm a partner with Build Consulting. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C. area, and Melissa did mention I've served all manner of nonprofit organizations and over the course of my career. I've worked with over 100 clients in both the nonprofit, government, and for-profit spaces. And over the last 7 years, I've worked exclusively with nonprofit organizations. And I have 3 primary areas of expertise: constituent relationship management, enterprise resource planning systems, and information strategy. Just a little bit about Build Consulting, and this segues into the topic for today. We do work exclusively with nonprofit organizations. We're a solution agnostic firm, and we help organizations make clear data and technology decisions that support their mission. And we have a collaborative approach that empowers our clients to make informed choices for their organizations. We lead in the social good sector with a variety of services, but the thing that ties them all together is that we want to help nonprofits transform themselves to better serve constituents of all types, including funders, donors, program beneficiaries, staff, volunteers, board and committee members, and the general public. And I specifically work primarily in part-time CIO services, as well as assessments and roadmaps, across all of the services, but in those areas specifically, and I work a lot at the intersection of the integrations between CRM and ERP systems. We have a basic philosophy at Build Consulting, and that's tomorrow's best nonprofits will use tech to transform themselves in the world. But despite that, currently the industry statistic is that more than 50% of nonprofit technology projects fail. And the reason for that, generally speaking, is varied, but our experience is that most nonprofit technology projects fail because of other factors than the technology. And what do we mean by that? Simply that in today's market, nonprofits have access to a broad range of quality technology solutions, including those fielded by JMT. And there's a good, or at least good enough, solution for the vast majority of needs. The challenge is often not the technology, but the fact that organizations do not first identify and make organizational changes necessary to successfully select and implement new technology or make significant improvements to their existing tech. And we have a formula that we share with our clients as well as others in the nonprofit space, which you see on screen here, and it stands for old organization plus new technology equals expensive old organization. And we say this to underscore that transformation is really critical to success in all nonprofit technology projects. There's no such thing as a technology project that isn't also a change management effort. So since the challenges are largely cultural and they orient around leadership and governance, operational capacity, business process, and data modeling, and then technology, we formulated this information strategy framework that you see on screen here. And it helps clients explore these considerations. And if you're interested in seeing more about this after today's presentation, we do have a free white paper available on our website called Build an Information Strategy for Your Organization. Kind of walks you through the process, what is an information strategy and how to go about building one, same as today's presentation, but at the end it also includes some diagnostic questions that can help you learn if maybe an information strategy is right for your organization. So what we're going to do today is go through each of the 5 keys to building an information strategy in turn that we just showed on the screen here. And then I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail about some of the most critical ones. So the first one that we showed was leadership. And generally speaking, we want to make sure in an information strategy that there are processes in place for leadership to be engaged in setting the tone for data and technology initiatives. These initiatives typically go much more smoothly, and even seemingly small information management initiatives benefit when leadership participates. So one example is over 18 months of working on a major information management initiative that I was on. Progress and success pretty much related directly to leadership's commitment to participating and making key decisions at critical junctures. So ultimately, you need to plan for leadership to be engaged, to set the vision and strategy for information management, and to make key decisions. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. For operations, you basically start with getting the right people on the bus. You make sure that you have good project planning and management, particularly time management. We'll talk a little bit about that in a few more minutes as well. And be sure to communicate effectively with all of the audiences that need to be involved in the process. One good example of this is there was a national nonprofit that I worked with that made sure to have the right people involved with the sound project organization and thorough communications. And they had a very successful multi-year technology roadmap that they were able to implement because they made strong commitment to building their capacities in those areas. Designing effective processes means more than just coming up with the best way to do something. It means developing sufficient documentation of the processes and, above all, executing the processes consistently. It is one thing to agree on a standard process while in the conference room and another to actually put it into practice at your desk. So a good example of this is I worked with a national volunteer organization that defined its case management processes in such a way that made a clear information management roadmap and organizational change initiative truly effective. And one of the things that we note is that organizations actually aren't always aware of what their processes are sufficiently well enough to agree on what improvements to them should be. So a good part of really getting your mind around an information strategy for your organization is to ask yourself the question, what key processes are we involved in? How do they serve our constituents, including our internal constituents? And how do they serve to accomplish business outcomes? And really getting on the same page in regards to all of that. And that is key to implementing an information strategy, because processes are the key to the reason why we manage data and the technology that supports that. So a lot of good information strategy starts with business requirements, and processes is a huge part of that. And we'll talk about a little bit about that in a minute. Data must be consistently collected, well organized, properly maintained, and used. Organizations need to do all of these things well in order to have an effective information management environment. So there's another presentation that I often give called How Data Quality Defines Your Organization. And that really is about understanding the different aspects of data quality that need to be in place in order for you to really excel with data management. And especially how to make decisions about what data to prioritize and how clean a data needs to be. It basically is an exploration of what makes good data good. And that's something you can sign up for. I think we're next presenting that in November. I also presented it early this year at Data Analysts for Good's annual conference called Good Tech Fest, which is an opportunity to engage more with your peers around data and technology that I encourage and recommend to you. And finally, we get to technology. I think that technology can be viewed as the simple answer to address challenges with leadership, operations, processes, and data. For the most part, technology is supportive of how organizations behave, and new technology will, for the most part, not make up for what is lacking in other areas. So in order to really be successful with technology, because it is so aligned to the 4 prior keys, you have to make sure that everything upstream of that is successful. And the 3 areas that are highlighted in blue here, leadership, operations, and processes, are really more organizationally focused, while data and technology is really what you think about more as IT. And the emphasis that I want to place on today's presentation is that it is really important to get leadership, operations, and processes as it comes to information strategy correct. Otherwise, your chances of succeeding with data and technology decrease exponentially. So basically what we're going to talk about today in this central part of the presentation is to talk about 9 different keys to success within the context of the information strategy framework that we just talked about. 2 regarding leadership, then 6 related to operations, and concluding with an extremely critical key to success that encompasses process, data, and technology. And following that, we should have plenty of time for questions. The topic of information strategy is very broad, and we're only going to have an opportunity to focus on some of the keys today. And these key aspects are things that are specifically research-based as contributing to success with nonprofit technology endeavors. There's a whole article on our website that pulls together all of this information. I think that it is called Why Nonprofit Technology Projects Succeed, and that's easy to find on our website at buildconsulting.com as well. So a lot of this information and the research behind it is represented there. So we talked a little bit earlier about actively engaged executive sponsors, and I want to dig into that a little bit because it's not often thought of as part of an information strategy or IT roadmap, but it is critically important. And what we want to focus on with clients, generally speaking, is having executive sponsors for tech and data projects that provide visible participation and regular communication, and also consistently are engaged enough with the project to assist with the prioritization of resources towards the effort, providing guidance and support and ensuring accountability. And the reason for this, and to make it a part of an information strategy that's either focused on one key area, functional area of your business, or across the entire enterprise, is that particularly for major projects that require extensive reallocation of staff time to complete successfully, actively engaged executive sponsors may by itself be the difference between being successful with a project and not. We frequently see nonprofits that start with strong executive interaction in the project, but that attention wanes over time. And there's a strong correlation between losing executive focus on the project and the project performance setbacks that can ensue. If you'd like to read more on how executives can best support technology projects, again, there's an extensive post on our blog written by one of our partners, David Deal, who's a lead strategist at Build. And he's also an experienced CEO and nonprofit CIO, as well as being a nonprofit board member. And this post could be an effective tool for getting the right buy-in and engagement from senior execs at your own organizations. And I've noticed over time that they're more likely to absorb the message about planning for executive sponsorship and really defining what that means from someone that has been at their level within an organization than they are to absorb the same message from a director, manager, or staff member at a lower organizational level. So that's a good resource for you to check out. And we just want to underscore actively engaged executive sponsors are a major key to success in information strategy as it governs technology projects. The second key to leadership success is to identify business benefits and performance measures. And this should be done as a collective effort, including all necessary stakeholders, but led by leadership. And basically, leadership needs to drive the conversation towards agreeing what purposeful actions during implementation of the roadmap, the technology roadmap, or the information strategy will ensure that the business benefits are realized and sustained once the efforts end. So, and to develop clear structures and models for performance measurement, which is something that a lot of organizations struggle with in both the for-profit and nonprofit sectors, but particularly I found in the nonprofit arena. So an example of a business benefit would be to achieve a 10% increase in sustaining members for a nonprofit organization that was funded primarily by donations. Technology can help support achieving this goal, particularly if it predicts which donors will become sustainers and then helps automate the outreach campaign process. But technology alone will not address this issue. So purposeful actions during the implementation might include effective training of staff on how to use the features and documenting new business processes to make sure that they can be sustainably performed over time, including surviving potential employee turnover. So this is an area that really needs to be driven by leadership because it requires a vision about how the organization is going to thrive over a period of time and how to achieve business benefit from the technology and data investments. So those were the two areas of leadership as pertaining to information strategy that I wanted to talk about today. And then the other thing that I'd like to talk about is starting in the operations front is project planning and direction. This is something that a lot of nonprofits don't really excel at. Even if they excel at project planning for their external projects, their constituent-facing projects and programs, they're often not good at doing it for themselves internally for their internal initiatives. One of the things that research shows is, as pertaining to technology and data initiatives, is that experience is key. So you should choose someone to lead those projects that has already successfully performed a similar project in a similar situation. And by similar situation, I mean an organization or environment of similar size, orientation, and complexity. So this is really an information strategy consideration, because if your organization doesn't already have the capacity to do project planning and direction for major initiatives, particularly for major internal initiatives, then it could be a big challenge to implement technology and data projects down the road. And in regards to leadership, project planning and direction, empowerment is key. It's very difficult being an unempowered project director or manager who stakeholders can feel free to ignore or disregard. One of the primary challenges of successful time management at nonprofit orgs is that employee time is often not budgeted or tracked for other projects, resulting in the behavior that all staff time is considered infinitely flexible. You may have seen this in your organization where if projects aren't planned, they can often, planned well in terms of time involvement, they can often conflict with what we call competing initiatives, and that is other organizational initiatives that might compete for the time of team members that are participating in an information technology or systems implementation project. As a consequence of that staff time being viewed as sort of infinitely flexible in practical fact, staff are often given new responsibilities associated with data and technology projects, but managers don't take anything off of their staff's plates so that they have time available to commit to the effort. And this results in many data and technology projects underperforming or failing outright, as well as morale problems and increased turnover during lengthy projects. One of the things that we often tell nonprofits is if they're considering a major CRM implementation or a major ERP implementation, and when I say major, I mean of sufficiently large size and scope that it impacts a large percentage of the organization's staff or other forms of employees or volunteers, are they really willing to make it a top 3 organizational priority or initiative during the time span in which that project is occurring? And that is what it takes to really be successful in getting key return on investment out of those kinds of systems, is making it a priority, really handling the project planning and direction, specifically time management and project as a part of project management. It really lends itself to getting that level of time prioritization from involved team members. And complementing project management on the operations front is building change management capacity. Technology change and data management change always require some sort of behavioral change. The practice of change management helps define the change that is coming, assess the impact of the change on the various roles within the organization, and then helps prepare those roles for the impact. Build Consulting has a changed impact analysis how-to tool and template in the resources section of our website if this is something you want to dig into. It is something that some organizations do very well organically, but it is not a typical skill that we find really well developed inside organizations as it pertains to once in every so often large-scale technology projects such as CRM or ERP implementations. So you might be able to get by fine with your current level of change management capacity, but in terms of planning for major technology initiatives, you may need to bolster and formalize that effort a little bit. So effective change management includes incorporating leadership alignment, communications, training, and support around that particular change that's taking place. So I'm currently working on a Salesforce-based client case management system that's being rolled out to 10,000 volunteer mentors across over 300 chapters nationwide. And in that scenario, leadership alignment includes not only the leadership of the national office, but also the regional vice presidents, district directors, and chapter leadership, and making sure that those in leadership at every level are aligned to the business goals and performance metrics for the new system. Communicating the phase timing of the rollout as well as value props for the new system across the entire volunteership is critical. Training all expected users in the new system is of course highly important, as is planning for and delivering help desk support to all of the users. And these things, leadership alignment, communications, training, and support, need to be taken into consideration for all technology projects from the early stages, regardless of project size. But of course, the level of change management capacity needs to be scaled to the size of the effort and will be at its greatest scale for large and complex projects. The reason why I say that they need to be taken into consideration from the early stages is because it's something that's not often considered when budgeting time or money for these kinds of projects until you're already well into the implementation itself and the need for them becomes apparent because of challenges that are being experienced. So it's generally better to plan for and budget for these things as being part of any technology change effort in advance. Risk assessments are particularly necessary for larger complex projects, so I'm not going to spend as much time talking about them as change management. But a good risk assessment is part of creating a technology roadmap or information strategy. And a good risk assessment assesses all of the potential challenges or risks for a project, including each one's source, the probability of it occurring, and potential impact on a project cost, schedule, or performance. It also introduces the mitigation or response plan for each risk. And a risk assessment is not a one and done proposition, much like project management and change management. It's something that needs to be revisited and updated to track the status of existing risks and add new risks as they enter into the picture. One example of a typical risk that I have already touched upon is a lack of stakeholder availability to participate in the project based on conflicting priorities or events. And depending on the degree, this risk could have a high impact on project cost, schedule, and performance. A good example of how to mitigate that risk would be to take steps to make sure that team members are freed from responsibilities that conflict with progress on the project. And I can't emphasize it enough that when any technology change project is taking place inside of an organization or any major change in how information or data is managed or distributed, it's usually being given to staff that are involved in the change as an additional task to what they are currently undertaking in their everyday lives. So it's a real concern that if they are not really freed up to participate in the technology change effort, that a real risk is going to appear there. And finally, from an information strategy operations consideration, studies show that organizations that take an open and collaborative approach take an open and collaborative approach focused in incremental design and implementation process show greater potential for success. So it is statistically at least, more likely that your organization will be successful if it builds the operational capacity to manage technology and data projects in a collaborative and iterative way. This is most commonly referred to as an agile process. And this style helps to keep all of the key stakeholders engaged throughout the many critical decisions and review approval processes throughout a technology project, from the start of requirements discovery all the way through post-implementation phases. And it also helps break down project complexities into bite-sized chunks. Now, one warning is appropriate here. It is important that when you're selecting or considering for selection implementation vendors to help implement a software system, and that vendor uses an agile approach, that the vendor has the ability to be flexible when working with an organization that has never, or maybe never successfully, been through a true agile process. Introducing an agile approach to an organization unused to working in that style can be a major culture clash that can cause projects to get bogged down or collapse entirely. For agile projects, for example, it is very important that stakeholders are frequently available to participate in design reviews and user testing, sometimes on a weekly basis. This also means committing the necessary time to make business decisions within accelerated timeframes compared to what the organization might be accustomed to. So applying agile principles in a way that will truly work for each organization is very important. And again, this is under the category of developing operational capacities to be really successful in implementing data and technology projects. And finally, actually two more things I think under operations. The first is to have supportive tools and to plan for having supportive tools to help underpin your future data and technology projects and the investments you're making in those projects. Because successful projects most frequently create a digital project collaboration environment that manages and socializes critical information related to the project. At Build, we prefer teamwork projects to tools like Basecamp, Asana, or MS Project. But the key is to have a functional space that's universally adopted by all the key project participants, and in which folks can be on the same page in regards to milestones, tasks, agendas, notes, files, key conversations, any information that the project requires to be successful. The best way to make sure a tool like this remains in active use with up-to-date information throughout the entire project is to use the information in the system as a live point of reference within team meetings and to drive performance reporting to stakeholders. So this is often something that we introduce, sort of project management principles as well as project management tools to clients in the course of helping them with major technology initiatives. And many of our clients also use that as an opportunity to expose their internal teams to better project and change management disciplines and the tools that support them. And then either with our help or with a little bit of help for us, they roll out those new capabilities that they've developed to other areas of their organization so that they have the benefit of applying the lessons that they've learned from a project management and change management standpoint and the supportive tools to other areas of their organization. And that's one of the things we take pride in as a group at Build Consulting is what are beyond the specific intention of the project, say a CRM implementation, what is it that the organization is able to do better or differently as a large part of their organization, larger than the impact of that specific CRM project? What tools and capacities have we been able to help them develop that improve operations in general? And it is important to note that when information strategies are well done, they do tend to touch on and impact a lot of areas of the organization and can often be catalysts for a lot of operational improvement in ways that you wouldn't necessarily think about when just considering an individual technology project or projects. And finally, one of the things that you want to plan for as part of operational capacity development for a good information strategy is professional skills development. Because data and technology projects, particularly large and complex ones, often require team members inside a nonprofit to step into roles for which they are not fully equipped. And so the most successful organizations take this into consideration and take steps to make sure that the team members are provided with the professional skills development they need to be successful in these roles. And special emphasis should be given to planning, which we already mentioned, communication also already mentioned, teamwork, time management, and change adaptations and adaptation skills. For one major project in which I'm currently engaged, I have weekly professional development meetings with the acting, now confirmed VP of Technology and the project coordinator, and then also ad hoc meetings towards the same purpose with other team members. The VP of Marketing and Strategy, who's the executive sponsor for the project, holds regular professional development meetings with other key project stakeholders. And in this way, we collaborate to ensure that all team members have their heads up when it comes to broadening their individual visions and equipping themselves with the perspective and skills they need to thrive in their project roles as pertaining to data and technology projects. And then to talk about process, data, and technology aspects of building an information strategy, I want to talk about requirements definition because it can wrap up in process, data, and technology into one bucket. Sort of look at those three through the lens of business requirements, and also technical requirements as well. So business requirements, as an example there, is the ability to transfer a case record from one counselor to another inside a counseling or human services organization within the same agency. And the technical requirement that accompanies that might be, you might want to have full data encryption for all counselor, client, and case data to make sure that when it's moving from one point to another, or even when it's just sitting in the database, that data is secured and protected. So business and technical requirements should be carefully documented and prioritized. There should be a set of standards that your organization uses repeatedly in terms of how it's going to document and prioritize requirements, how it's going to list and enumerate the business processes and prioritization associated with them, how it's going to map out the data model for its organization, and how technology is going to be aligned to meet those requirements. If an organization has a poor understanding of its current business processes and data, or processes are performed inconsistently, or data quality has been poorly managed, thorough business requirements can be very difficult to develop. And poor business requirements are, in fact, one of the leading contributors to projects running over budget and over schedule, and are a leading cause of the wrong system being selected and implemented. One of the reasons Build Consulting prefers to get involved with client technology projects during the early assessment and roadmap phase is because when we first get involved at the implementation phase for a CRM or ERP, for example, it often becomes apparent that the organization will need to back up and do requirements definition in a more deep or thorough manner before they can have a successful implementation. And when a vendor is engaged and the implementation is already moving forward, it can be very difficult and costly for the organization to push the pause button on the implementation project to go backwards and do good requirements definition. So because this is such a key area of focus for Build Consulting, and we've really helped a lot of clients with it, software vendors frequently tell us that our clients are better prepared to have successful software selections and implementations than any of their other nonprofit customers. And it's common for us to hear feedback like, I've been working in this space for 15 years and this is the best RFP we've ever received. And this is because, generally speaking, our clients have already anticipated, wrestled with, and made important requirements decisions, excuse me, ahead of going into the selection and implementation efforts. And this results in selecting software that matches the needs of the organization and a much better mutual understanding between the nonprofit and the vendor about what it actually takes to successfully complete the projects, including a much more accurate projection of the total cost, which is very important to nonprofits and vendors alike in terms of maintaining mutual expectations and harmony and bringing projects to successful completion. So we talked about the 5 keys to information strategy. I spent most of the time focusing on leadership, operations, and then bridging processes, data, and technology together under the heading of requirements. There's so much that we could talk about under the keys to an information strategy, how to build out an information strategy plan and document it, what are the different components of that, You may have questions in regards to some of the things that I've mentioned, like how do you create a constituent engagement lifecycle? What does documenting of processes look like? What does the data model look like? How do we basically pull together all of these components into making a clear information strategy? And I'm happy to answer those questions and also to show you, if necessary, some examples of what some of those components look like. But I want to take you through a little bit, just verbally, quickly, what building an information strategy for your organization looks like. It basically takes a good look at all of the different technology and data assets that your organization has in place today. And what are the aspirations for the future from the organization as pertaining to its business outcomes and how data and technology are going to support that. And then using that as a starting point to really take a pulled back look at all of the leadership, operations, processes, and yes, data and technology for the organization. What are its strengths and weaknesses? What are the areas for improvement? And then to basically go about through the process of assessing the entire current technology landscape within the organization. Or if you're having an information strategy initiative that's just focused on CRM, everything that CRM touches, or if it's just focused on ERP, everything that ERP touches. And then you're going to basically take a look at it and say, for what we want to achieve as a business, and what we want to do to help technology enable and support growth for our organization, as well as data. What are the investments that we need to make in each one of these 5 areas over a period of time, typically a 3 or 4 year time span? And how are those projects that we need to improve for areas that we need to improve, prioritized and sequenced and budgeted and planned for? And basically what you end up with is a set of key findings and recommendations for each of these areas to look at the information strategy landscape from a global perspective. And then a technology roadmap that's the second half of that, that really lays out all of the individual projects that will be fulfilled as part of the information strategy and what it's going to take to achieve those efforts in a timeline. So again, I've thrown a lot of information at you in a very short period of time. I just want to say that if there is any area that intrigued you about this conversation or anything that we're not able to get to in the Q&A, I'm always available to dialogue further to answer your questions. The slides will be distributed as a PDF to all registrants, and it has this information in it. So feel free to reach out to me at my email address or through LinkedIn, and the website buildconsulting.com is where all of the resources that I've mentioned over the course of this presentation are located. So if you want to dive more deeply into what is an information strategy broadly considered, how the information strategy is built, executive sponsorship, any of the change or project management issues, even if you're interested in very system-specific subjects like, I'm a mid-sized nonprofit, what are the sort of CRM and marketing automation products that are currently in the market that are merit-worthy and should engage my interest. That kind of information is available there as well. So I invite you to reach out, continue the conversation. Happy to spend some time with you over the phone or an email. And with that, we'll go to see if there's any Q&A.
I don't have any questions just yet. So as a reminder to everyone, if you do have a question, you can type it in the Q&A box. You just push the button and it'll pop up. And some people also like to submit it through the chat. So we'll leave it open for some questions.
Mm-hmm. And while we're waiting to see if there are any questions that come in, just feel free to interrupt me at any time, Melissa. I can expose folks to a few resources that might come in handy as well, or might answer some of their more specific questions. One of the things that I alluded to earlier was, what does requirements definition look like? What does it look like when it's done well? This is an example of a detailed inventory for data, and a process definition would look something similar like this. You're basically going through the process of describing the processes and its impact on the users, and on the constituents. I did mention also data modeling in order to show you what that might look like. This is the map of the key data objects for a client that I was working with that was in the housing assistance space, making loans and performing loan underwriting and servicing for affordable housing development. So this is just to make a little bit more concrete for you some of the things that I talked about. When we're talking about business process mapping and analysis, this is one of the things that I talked about, just walking folks through a process, and this is a loan application process, highlighting key areas for improvement, and really noting down and building a consensus around what the critical aspects of an organization's business process flow are.
Those are great. Thank you. I still don't have any questions right now, so I think that we'll go ahead and let people have some of their hour back. But like Peter said, if you do have follow-up questions or want to reach out to him personally, his information was at the end of the slides, and we'll also include that in our follow-up email.
Yes, indeed.
So, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, everyone, and thank you, Peter, for your time and doing this webinar with us. And if you're interested in more webinars put on by JMT, you can go to our website, JMT Consulting, and click on the Events tab. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.